The lye soap had eaten through her skin by the time Clara Porter noticed the blood mixing with the dirty water. But she kept scrubbing, because stopping meant losing the only job she had in Casa Grande, Arizona. It was 1883, and opportunities for a 22-year-old woman with no family and no references were as scarce as rain in the desert summer that blazed outside the Lucky Silver Saloon. Her knees ached against the wooden floorboards, her back screamed from hours bent over, and her hands felt like they were on fire. But Clara had survived worse since her father's wagon had overturned 3 months ago on the trail from Missouri, killing him instantly and leaving her stranded in a territory that showed no mercy to the weak. The saloon owner, a thick-necked man named Garrett who smelled perpetually of whiskey and cigars, paid her $2 a week to scrub floors, wash glasses, and empty spittoons. It was barely enough to rent a corner of a room in a boarding house where 4 other women slept, all of them working girls from the saloon upstairs. Clara kept to herself, kept her head down, and tried not to think about how her mother back in Missouri had dreamed of her marrying a banker or a shop owner, someone respectable who would give her a comfortable life. Those dreams had died along with her father on the dusty Arizona road. She dipped her brush back into the bucket, ignoring the sting as the soap found new ways to torment her raw flesh. Blood swirled in the water like red silk ribbons. A drop fell from her thumb and splashed onto the board she had just cleaned. Clara bit her lip hard enough to taste copper and kept working. If Garrett saw blood on his precious floors, he would dock her pay or worse, turn her out completely. Good God, woman. The voice came from above her, deep and startled. Clara jerked her head up so fast her neck cracked. A man stood 3 feet away, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dusty brown hat that shadowed his face. She had been so focused on the floor she had not heard him approach. Her first instinct was fear because men in saloons before noon usually wanted something, and she had nothing to give except refusal. "I'm almost finished with this section," she said quickly, her voice hoarse from disuse. She talked to almost no one during her days. "I'll move if you need to pass." The man crouched down, and Clara saw his face properly for the first time. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with strong features bronzed by the sun and eyes the color of creek water after a storm, that peculiar mix of gray and green and blue. A few days of dark stubble covered his jaw. He was looking at her hands with an expression she could not quite read. "You're bleeding all over the floor you're trying to clean," he said, and his tone was not cruel but something else, something that sounded almost like concern, which confused her more than cruelty would have. "I'll fix it," Clara said, pulling her hands back and tucking them against her stomach, leaving red smears on her already filthy apron. "Please, I just need to finish. I cannot lose this position." "What's he paying you?" the man asked. Clara hesitated. It seemed like a trap, though she could not imagine what kind. $2 weekly. The man's jaw tightened. He stood up, and Clara thought he was going to walk away, but instead he turned toward the bar where Garrett was polishing glasses with a rag that was probably dirtier than the glasses themselves. "Garrett," the saloon owner looked up, his piggy eyes narrowing. "What do you want, Rourke?" "You paying off your tab. I'm taking your floor, girl," the man called Rourke said flatly. "Consider us square." Clara's heart stuttered in her chest. She started to stand, her legs shaking beneath her. What did he mean, taking her? Men did not just take women, except they did, all the time out here where law was a suggestion and might made right. She looked around frantically for an escape route, but Garrett was already laughing, a wet, phlegmy sound. "You want that scrawny thing? Hell, Rourke, you're doing me a favor." "She's too slow anyway. We're square and good riddance to her." The man turned back to Clara and she shrank back despite herself, but he just held out his hand, palm up, not grabbing. "Come on, let's get those hands seen to before infection sets in." "I do not understand," Clara whispered. Her mind was spinning. She had just lost her job. She had nowhere to go. This stranger was talking about infection as if he cared whether she lived or died. Nothing made sense. "You'll understand outside," he said, "but you need bandages and salve, and you need them now. That lye soap will eat straight through to the bone if it is left much longer." Clara looked down at her hands. They were worse than she had realized, raw and weeping. The skin around her knuckles cracked so deeply she could see the white of flesh beneath. The adrenaline that had kept her working was fading, and the pain was rolling in like a thunderstorm, sharp and overwhelming. She swayed slightly. Rourke caught her elbow with a gentle grip. "Easy now. When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning," Clara admitted. She had been saving her pennies, trying to get enough together to buy a ticket to anywhere else, somewhere with more opportunities. The attempt seemed foolish now. "Christ," Rourke muttered. He guided her toward the door, his hand steady on her elbow, and Clara was too dizzy and confused and in too much pain to resist. The Arizona sun hit her like a physical force when they stepped outside, and she squinted against the brutal brightness. The main street of Casa Grande stretched out before them, a wide dirt road lined with wooden buildings, all of them looking half abandoned in the midday heat. A few horses stood at hitching posts, tails swishing at flies. A dog lay in the shade of the general store, panting. Rourke led her down the street to a building with a painted sign that read "Rooms" in faded letters. He took her inside, up a narrow staircase, and into a small room that held a bed, a chair, a washstand, and little else. But it was clean, and the window let in light without letting in too much heat, and Clara found herself trembling as Rourke eased her down onto the chair. "Wait here," he said, and left. Clara sat frozen, her mind racing. She should run. She should leave before he came back and revealed whatever his true intentions were. Men did not help women for no reason. Everyone wanted something. But her hands were throbbing so badly she felt sick, and her legs did not seem capable of carrying her anywhere. She stared at the floorboards, counting the knots in the wood, trying to keep herself present. Rourke returned within minutes carrying a basin of clean water, several strips of cloth, and a small tin. He set everything on the washstand and dragged it closer to her chair. Then he knelt in front of her again, which struck her as odd. Men did not kneel for women like her. "This is going to hurt," he said quietly, "but it has to be done. I need to clean the soap out of the wounds." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Rourke took her right hand in both of his, and his touch was surprisingly careful. He dipped a cloth in the water and began to clean away the blood and soap residue. Clara bit down on her lip again, tasting fresh blood, breathing hard through her nose. It hurt worse than the scrubbing had. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes, but she refused to make a sound. "You're tough," Rourke said, his focus on her hand. "Most people would be screaming." "Screaming does not help anything," Clara managed. "No," he agreed, "but it is allowed." He finished with her right hand and started on her left. The basin water turned pink, then red. When both hands were clean, he opened the tin, and the sharp smell of carbolic salve filled the small room. He spread it gently across her wounds, and the cooling sensation was so intense after the burning that Clara let out a small sob of relief despite herself. Rourke began wrapping her hands in the clean cloth strips, working with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this before. "You worked at the Lucky Silver for how long?" he asked. 3 weeks, Clara said. "Since I arrived in Casa Grande." "Where are you from?" "Missouri." "My father and I were heading to California. He died on the way. Wagon accident." Rourke's hands paused for just a moment, then continued rapping. "I am sorry." "So am I," Clara whispered. "I do not know what I am going to do now. I needed that job. I have nowhere to go." "Yes, you do," Rourke said. He tied off the bandage on her left hand and sat back on his heels, looking up at her. "I told Garrett you work for me now. I meant it." Clara stared at him. "I do not understand what you mean. What work?" "I run a ranch about 10 miles outside town," Rourke said. "The running are, it is not much, but it is growing. I have cattle, horses, and a house that needs managing. I need someone to cook, keep the place clean, tend the vegetable garden, help with the chickens. Real work, not destroying yourself scrubbing saloon floors for a man who does not give a damn if you live or die." "I do not know anything about ranching," Clara said slowly. "I grew up in a town. My father was a clerk." "You can learn," Rourke said, "and I am not asking you to work cattle. I am asking you to keep house. Can you cook?" "Yes," Clara said. "My mother taught me before she passed when I was 16. "Then you know more than I do," Rourke said with a slight smile that transformed his serious face into something warmer. "I have been living on beans and hard bread for 6 months since my housekeeper married and moved to Tucson. I am offering you room, board, and $5 a week. More than double what Garrett was paying you, and no lye soap in sight." Clara's head was spinning again, but this time not from hunger or pain. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Rourke stood and moved to the window, looking out at the street below. His profile was strong, thoughtful. "My mother died when I was 12, he said quietly. "Worked herself to death keeping house for a man who owned the hotel in Prescott. Paid her barely enough to feed me, and when she got sick, he turned her out. She died in a charity hospital 3 days later. I swore then I would never stand by and watch someone be used up and thrown away if I could prevent it. So when I saw you bleeding on that floor, trying so hard to keep going because you had no other choice, I saw her. And I decided you needed a better option." The silence stretched between them, heavy with old grief and new possibility. Clara looked at her bandaged hands. $5 a week was not a fortune, but it was enough to save money, maybe eventually buy a ticket somewhere else if the ranch did not work out. And Rourke seemed, against all odds, to be genuine. She had gotten good at reading men in the past 3 months, developed an instinct for danger. He did not set off those warnings. "When would I start?" she asked. Rourke turned from the window and his expression was relieved. "Tomorrow, if your hands can manage. Today you should rest and eat. Have you any belongings?" "A small bag at the boarding house on 3rd Street, Clara said. "Just a change of clothes and my mother's Bible." "I will take you to collect it, then get you some food," Rourke said. "And before you worry, I have a spare room in the ranch house. You will have your own space, your own privacy. This is a job, Miss Porter, just a job." The fact that he even thought to clarify that he understood she might be afraid, made Clara's throat tighten. "How do you know my name?" "Garrett mentioned it once," Rourke said. "I am Owen Rourke. Most people call me Owen." "Clara," she said, though he already knew, "and thank you. I do not have words for what this means." Owen shook his head. "Thank me when you have seen the house. It is a mess. You may run screaming back to Casa Grande within a day." But Clara did not run screaming. The next morning, after a night spent in the room Owen had paid for at the boarding house, after collecting her pathetic bundle of possessions, and eating the first full meal she had had in weeks, she climbed onto the wagon bench beside him and they rode out into the desert. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, all red rock and scrub brush and endless sky. The heat was already building even though it was barely past dawn. The running R sat in a valley between 2 low ridges, with a creek running along the northern edge that Owen said never dried up, which made the land valuable. The house was adobe, single-story, with a wide porch and windows that faced east to catch the morning light. Behind it were a barn, a chicken coop, a corral, and several smaller outbuildings. It was rough and isolated, but Clara felt something loosen in her chest at the sight of it. It felt like possibility. Owen helped her down from the wagon, careful of her hands. "Let me show you around." The inside of the house was indeed a mess, but not as bad as Clara had feared. The main room held a large stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with chairs, and a couch that had seen better days. The kitchen area was in the back, with a good iron stove and cabinets that were sturdy if dusty. There were 3 doors leading off the main room. Owen opened one to reveal a bedroom with a simple bed, a trunk, and a window. "This is yours," he said. "I am across the hall. The 3rd room is storage, but we can clear it out if you need more space." Clara stepped into the room and set her bag on the bed. It was sparse, but it was hers, private, safe. She turned to Owen, who was leaning against the doorframe, his hat in his hands. "What are my hours?" she asked. "Reasonable ones," Owen said. "Breakfast at dawn, supper at dusk. The cleaning and other work you can do on your own schedule. If you need help with anything heavy, you tell me. No working yourself sick. That is not negotiable." Clara nodded slowly. "All right. Your hands need another day or 2 to heal before you do much," Owen continued. "So today, just settle in. Familiarize yourself with where everything is. I will handle meals." "I can manage," Clara protested, but Owen held up a hand. "I am sure you can, but I am telling you not to. Doctor's orders. You are not a doctor." "I have patched up enough injuries on this ranch to qualify," Owen said with that slight smile again. "Humor me, Clara." The use of her first name sent a little flutter through her stomach that she firmly ignored. This was a job. He was her employer. She could not afford to be foolish. "All right," she said again. "Thank you." Owen nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Clara sank onto the bed and looked at her bandaged hands. For the first time in 3 months since her father died and her world fell apart, she felt like she might be able to breathe. The days fell into a rhythm. Clara's hands healed faster than she expected, though the skin remained tender and pink for weeks. She learned the layout of the ranch, the routines, the work. Owen had not exaggerated about his cooking skills. The first meal she made, a simple stew with vegetables from the struggling garden and beef from the smokehouse, made him groan with genuine pleasure. "I had forgotten food could taste like this," he said, going back for seconds. "You are a miracle worker." Clara felt her cheeks heat. "It is just stew." "It is the best thing I have eaten in 6 months, Owen countered. "You have already earned your wages." She threw herself into the work, not out of fear of losing the position, but because she genuinely wanted to do well. The house slowly came back to life under her care. She scrubbed floors again, but this time with gentle soap and gloves Owen bought her in town. She beat the dust out of curtains, organized the chaotic storage room, coaxed the garden back to productive life. The chickens took to her immediately, which Owen found endlessly amusing. "They hated me," he said, watching as Clara scattered feed and the hens clucked contentedly around her feet. "Drew blood more than once." "You probably scared them," Clara said. "You have to be gentle." "I am gentle," Owen protested. Clara raised an eyebrow. "You are a man who breaks horses and wrestles cattle. Chickens need a different approach." Owen laughed, a full, genuine sound that Clara realized she had not heard before. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger and less careworn. She found herself wanting to hear it again. They talked during meals, carefully at first, then with growing ease. Owen told her about buying the ranch 3 years ago with money he had saved from working cattle drives and mining operations. He had a vision of building something lasting, something he could be proud of. Clara told him about Missouri, about her quiet life as a clerk's daughter, about the books she had loved to read, and the music her mother used to play on their piano. They had both lost so much. They were both trying to build something new from the wreckage. 3 weeks after Clara arrived, a summer storm rolled through, violent and brief. The rain hammered the roof like bullets and lightning split the sky. Clara stood at the window watching the display, fascinated and a little frightened. She had not experienced a desert storm before. The sheer power of it was overwhelming. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Owen said from behind her, and Clara jumped. She had not heard him approach. He came to stand beside her at the window. "Dangerous as hell, but beautiful." "We had storms in Missouri," Clara said, "but nothing like this. The lightning is so close." "The open land," Owen said. "There is nothing to stop it." He glanced at her. "Are you all right? You look pale." "Just startled," Clara said. But the truth was that she was very aware of how close Owen was standing, how she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool air brought by the rain. She could smell the scent of leather and horses and something uniquely him. It made her heart beat faster in a way that had nothing to do with the storm. She had been trying so hard not to notice how handsome he was, how his rare smiles made her stomach flutter, how safe she felt when he was near. This was her employer. She was his housekeeper. There were clear lines, and crossing them would be disastrous. But standing there in the lightning-lit room, Clara felt those lines blurring. Owen seemed to realize the proximity at the same moment. He cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should check that the barn door is secure," he said. "The wind might have blown it open." He left quickly, and Clara pressed her forehead against the cool window glass, trying to settle her racing pulse. This was dangerous territory. She could not afford to develop feelings. But her heart, it seemed, had not consulted her practical mind before making its own decisions. The next morning, Owen was distant at breakfast, polite but formal. Clara told herself it was for the best. They needed to maintain professional boundaries, but it hurt in a way she had not anticipated. 2 days later, Owen returned from town with a package wrapped in brown paper. He set it on the table in front of Clara as she was rolling out dough for biscuits. "For you," he said. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and carefully opened the package. Inside were 2 books, their covers pristine and beautiful. One was a collection of poetry by Walt Whitman. The other was a novel by Louisa May Alcott. Clara stared at them, her throat closing up. "You mentioned you missed reading," Owen said, sounding almost nervous. "I thought, well, the evenings are long and you should have something for yourself." Clara touched the books with flour-dusted fingers, feeling tears prick her eyes. No one had given her a gift in so long. Not since her father had bought her a hair ribbon for her birthday 2 years ago. "Owen, I cannot accept these. They must have been expensive." "You can and you will," Owen said firmly. "You work hard, Clara. You have made this house a home again. You deserve something just for you." She looked up at him, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. There was warmth there, and affection, and something deeper that she was afraid to name. "Thank you," she whispered. "This means more than you know." Owen nodded and left quickly, as if he did not trust himself to stay. Clara carefully set the books aside and went back to her biscuits, but her hands were shaking, and her heart was full of something that felt dangerously close to joy. That night, she sat on the porch reading poetry by lamplight. Owen came out after finishing his evening chores and sat in the other chair, whittling a piece of wood. They did not speak, but the silence was comfortable, companionable. Clara found herself reading passages aloud without meaning to, and Owen listened, his hands stilling on his work. "Your voice is lovely," he said when she paused. "My mother used to read to me when I was young. I had forgotten how much I liked it." "I can read to you any time," Clara offered, then felt her cheeks flush. "I mean if you would like." "I would," Owen said softly. "I would like that very much." Summer deepened into fall. The work continued, but it had ceased to feel like obligation. Clara found herself singing as she worked, planning meals she knew Owen would love, looking forward to their evenings on the porch. Owen brought her small gifts from town: a new apron, a packet of seeds for the garden, a comb inlaid with turquoise. Nothing extravagant, but each item carefully chosen, each one showing that he paid attention to what she liked, what she needed. They were falling in love, and both of them knew it, and neither spoke of it because the fear of disrupting what they had built was too great. The moment everything changed came on a cool October evening. Clara was preparing supper when she heard a horse approaching fast. She went to the window and saw a man riding hard toward the house, his horse lathered with sweat. Owen emerged from the barn, his posture wary. The rider pulled up in a spray of dust. "Rourke, we need help. There is a fire spreading from the Peterson place. The wind is pushing it toward town. Every able body is needed." Owen did not hesitate. "I will get my horse." He looked toward the house, saw Clara in the window. Their eyes met, and she saw the conflict in his face, the desire to keep her safe warring with the knowledge that he had to go. Clara made the decision for both of them. She stepped onto the porch. "Go, I will be fine here. The creek will protect the ranch if the fire comes this way." Owen nodded, already moving toward the barn. Within minutes, he was mounted and riding out with the other man, leaving Clara alone on the ranch as the sun set, and the western sky began to glow with an orange light that was not sunset. She tried to stay calm. She brought the chickens into their coop, moved the horses to the corral closest to the creek, filled every bucket she could find with water. The smell of smoke drifted on the wind. Clara stood on the porch watching the horizon, her heart in her throat, praying that Owen was safe. Hours passed. The glow in the west grew brighter, then gradually faded. Clara dozed fitfully in a chair on the porch, jerking awake at every sound. It was nearly dawn when she heard hoofbeats again. She stood so fast her chair fell over, and then Owen was there, dismounting, and Clara was running to him without thinking. She threw her arms around him and he caught her, holding her tight. He smelled of smoke and sweat and exhaustion, but he was solid and real and alive. Clara realized she was crying, her face pressed against his chest. "I'm all right," Owen said, his voice rough. "We stopped it before it reached town. Everyone is safe." "I was so scared," Clara sobbed. "I thought you might not come back." Owen's arms tightened around her. "Clara," he said, and his voice was different, raw with emotion. "Clara, I need to tell you something." She pulled back enough to look up at him. His face was streaked with soot, his eyes red from smoke, but the way he was looking at her made her whole body tremble. "I am in love with you," Owen said. "I have been for weeks, maybe since the first day when you were so fierce and brave even though you were hurting and scared. I know I am your employer and you might not feel the same, and if you do not, we can forget I said anything, but I cannot keep pretending anymore. I love you, Clara Porter. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you hum when you cook and the sound of your voice reading poetry. I love everything about you and I needed you to know." Clara's hands came up to cup his face, feeling the roughness of his stubble, the warmth of his skin. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have been trying so hard not to because I was afraid, but Owen, I love you so much." Owen made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then he was kissing her. Clara had been kissed before, awkward attempts by boys back in Missouri, but nothing like this. This was fire and tenderness, passion and reverence. Owen kissed her like she was precious, like she was everything he had ever wanted. Clara kissed him back with all the love she had been holding inside, all the hope she had been afraid to feel. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast, but I do not want to waste another day not calling you my wife. Marry me, Clara." "Yes," Clara said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, of course, yes." They were married 3 weeks later in Casa Grande by the circuit preacher who came through once a month. Clara wore a simple blue dress that Owen had bought her, new boots and flowers in her hair. Owen wore his best shirt and looked at her like she hung the moon. They spoke their vows in front of a handful of people from town, including Garrett from the Lucky Silver, who looked confused about how the skinny floor girl had landed a man like Owen Rourke. Clara did not care what anyone thought. She held Owen's hands, so much larger than her own, and promised to love and honor him for the rest of her life, and meant every word with her whole heart. The wedding night was tender and passionate, Owen careful with her, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Clara had been nervous, uncertain, but Owen was patient and loving, and when they finally came together it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like they were made to fit exactly this way. "I love you," Owen said afterward, holding her close in the darkness of their room. No longer his room and her room, but theirs. "I will spend every day of my life trying to deserve you." "You already do," Clara whispered, tracing patterns on his chest. "You saved me, Owen, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Owen said. "I was just existing before you came. You made me want to really live again." The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. The ranch grew and prospered. Clara expanded the garden, started selling vegetables and preserves in town, earning money that she carefully saved. Owen bought more cattle, more land. They worked hard, but they worked together, partners in every sense of the word. 2 years after their wedding, Clara gave birth to their first child, a son they named Samuel after Owen's father. He had his father's gray-green eyes and his mother's determination. Clara had been terrified during the pregnancy, remembering how many women died in childbirth out here where doctors were scarce. But Owen held her hand through the long labor, and when Samuel finally arrived, screaming his fury at the world, Clara felt a love so fierce it almost frightened her. Owen cried when he held his son for the first time, this strong, rough man reduced to tears by a tiny baby. "He is perfect," he said. "You are perfect. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Clara said, exhausted and happy and more content than she had ever imagined possible. Samuel was 3 when his sister arrived, a tiny, fierce girl they named Rose after Clara's mother. She had Clara's dark hair and Owen's stubbornness, and from the moment she could walk, she was following her father everywhere, determined to be a rancher like him. Owen adored her, this little girl who was afraid of nothing. The children grew up strong and healthy, running wild on the ranch, learning to ride and rope and work the land. Samuel was quiet and thoughtful, good with animals. Rose was bold and loud, always getting into trouble and charming her way back out. Clara watched them play and felt grateful every single day for the life she had built. On their 10th anniversary, Owen took Clara on a picnic to the creek that ran through their property. The children were spending the day with a neighboring family, giving them rare time alone. They sat on a blanket in the shade of a cottonwood tree, eating cold chicken and fresh bread, watching the water flow past. "You ever think about that day in the saloon?" Owen asked, lying back on the blanket with his head in Clara's lap. She ran her fingers through his hair, longer now than he used to wear it. "Sometimes," Clara said, "it feels like a different life, like that was someone else." "I walked into that saloon to get a drink," Owen said. "I almost did not go in at all. I was going to ride straight back to the ranch. But my horse needed water and I was thirsty, and I figured one drink would not hurt. If I had made a different choice, if I had just kept riding, I never would have seen you. We never would have met." Clara felt her throat tighten. "I do not like thinking about that." "Neither do I," Owen said. He reached up and took her hand, the one that had been bleeding that day, healed now with only faint scars remaining. He kissed her palm. "But I think about it sometimes because it reminds me how easily we could have missed each other. How lucky we are. How grateful I am that I walked through that door at exactly the right moment." "I was so scared," Clara admitted. "When you talked to Garrett, when you said I worked for you now, I thought you were going to hurt me. I thought you wanted something terrible." "I just wanted to help," Owen said. "But then I got to know you and I did want something. I wanted everything. Your heart, your trust, your love. I wanted forever with you." "You have it," Clara said. "You have all of it always." Owen sat up and cupped her face in his hands, looking at her with those eyes that still made her heart skip. "I love you more now than I did the day we married," he said. "I love you more every single day. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara Rourke." "And you are mine," Clara whispered, and kissed him there by the creek, the Arizona sun warm on their faces, their children's laughter echoing in her memory, their future stretching out bright and full of promise. More years passed, good ones and hard ones. There were droughts that tested their endurance, winters that were brutally cold, summers that baked the land until it cracked. There were times when money was tight and worry kept them awake at night. But they faced everything together. Owen and Clara, partners and lovers and best friends. Samuel grew into a serious young man who fell in love with the daughter of a rancher from the next valley over. Her name was Margaret, and she was smart and kind. And when Samuel brought her home and Clara saw the way her son looked at this girl, she recognized that same expression Owen had worn when he looked at her all those years ago. Samuel married Margaret in the spring of his 22nd year, and they built a house on the eastern edge of the running R land, expanding the family ranch. Rose surprised everyone by falling in love with a school teacher who came to Casa Grande from Boston. His name was James, and he was gentle and educated and completely baffled by ranch life, but he loved Rose with a devotion that reminded Clara of Owen. They married when Rose was 20, and James started a school in Casa Grande that served all the children in the valley. Rose helped him run it while still working the ranch part-time, as fierce and determined as ever. Owen's hair went silver at the temples, then silver throughout. Clara found strands of gray in her own dark hair. Their hands grew rough with decades of work. Owen developed a limp from an old injury that acted up in cold weather. Clara's back sometimes ached from years of lifting and carrying, but they were healthy and strong, still in love, still grateful. On a warm evening in late summer, nearly 30 years after Clara had first arrived at the running R, she and Owen sat on the porch watching the sunset. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, Samuel's 3 boys and Rose's twin daughters, their voices high and happy. Inside the house, Margaret and James were helping clean up after supper, their easy laughter drifting through the open windows. "This is what I dreamed of," Owen said quietly, his hand finding Clara's. "Not consciously maybe, but this. Family, home, love, you gave me all of it." Clara squeezed his hand, feeling the familiar roughness of his palm, the strength still in his grip. "We gave it to each other." "Do you remember what I said the day we met?" Owen asked. "When I bandaged your hands," Clara smiled. "You said a lot of things." "I told Garrett you worked for me," Owen said. "But that was not quite accurate. You never worked for me, Clara. You worked with me, beside me. We built this together." "We did," Clara agreed, "and I would not change a single moment, even the hard ones. They brought us here." Owen lifted her hand and kissed it, a gesture he had performed thousands of times over the decades but which never failed to make Clara's heart warm. "I love you," he said. "Today, tomorrow, and whatever comes after, I love you." I love you too, Clara said. Always. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange and deep rose. The children played, the family laughed, and Clara and Owen sat together on the porch of the house they had built, watching their dreams take shape in front of them. It had started with bleeding hands and a simple act of kindness, with a cowboy who saw someone suffering and decided to help, with a woman who was brave enough to accept that help and fight for something better. It had started with pain and ended with joy, with love that grew deeper and stronger every day, with a life neither of them had imagined but both had worked to create. Clara thought of that scared girl scrubbing floors in a saloon, her hands raw and bleeding, her future uncertain. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that the tall cowboy with the kind eyes was going to change everything, that pain and loss would transform into hope and happiness, but she could not go back, and she did not need to. She had Owen's hand in hers, her family around her, and a lifetime of memories that proved love could grow in even the harshest soil. The desert had tried to break them both, but they had survived together. They had built something lasting and true. They had built a home. And as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, as their grandchildren were called inside for bed, as Owen helped Clara stand and they walked into their house together, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. With the man she loved, in the life they had created, surrounded by the family that was their legacy. The story that had begun with blood and pain had become one of healing and hope. And it would continue through their children and grandchildren, through the generations that would work this land and carry their names forward. The running R would endure, a testament to what two people could build when they chose courage over fear, love over loneliness. Clara and Owen closed the door behind them, shutting out the night, and in the warm lamplight of their home, they held each other close. They had traveled a long road from that day in Casa Grande when a bleeding woman met a compassionate man. It had been a journey worth every step, every struggle, every moment of doubt, because they had found each other. And finding each other, they had found home.